Okay, welcome to morning two of the mixed conference. I'm with my buddy Ren Klyce. Hello, Ren.
Hi, Larry.
So, Ren, we're going to focus on your part of this whole thing with your music background and how it has informed in many ways your sound design chops and things like that. So, at which point did you take a career shift from the music end of things to uh, going into film sound? Thinking, I mean, were you thinking in college you were going to be in music only?
I didn't know really what I was going to do. I did know that I loved sound and music, and I don't even know if I really differentiated the two. Obviously they're different, but um, what I was really excited about was, of course, I went to school to study music, and I was a music major at UCSC, but what really got me excited was electronic music, but even not necessarily electronic music with synthesizers, but a different form of music called musique concrète, which was developed in the 1940s by two French composers, Pierre-Henri and Pierre Schaeffer, among other people who developed this. And it was the whole idea of, let's challenge what is music. Like, let's challenge the definition of music. And that was really fun for me to be exposed to, because, you go through life, you used to make these assumptions about things like, well, music has 12 notes to a scale, and there's a major chord and there's a minor chord, and you play the piano, and this is what a sound is. And then you learn about other cultures that have different scales, micro tunings of scales, and you start going, oh well, but they still have scales, and but there's still harmony, and there's still, you can sing a note, and there's A440, and there's this note, and there's relationships between notes, and that's all great, and that's what music is. But what I loved about these composers was just is it, like their challenge, like, is that what music is? I defy you. Music is this, and they would make a noise, and it's like, and then everybody, of course, the reaction is, that's not music, that's a sound, and they would go, that's your opinion, it's music to my ear. And so I loved that kind of irreverent French attitude, like, no one's going to tell us what is and what is not music. And when you're in college and you're learning about these things, and you get exposed to this kind of thinking, it really opens your mind up, and you start thinking, wait a minute, is this a bias that we all have? And why am I thinking that these are two different things? Is that correct? So that's kind of how I got excited. And then I took the electronic music course and learned how to record sounds and splice audio tape and create sound montages, and learned about sound being music. And so our first assignment was, let's create a piece of music out of sound. So from a very early age, I was sort of taught that music is sound, and sound is musical if you will open your mind for it to being that. And that really helped me with sound design, what we now call sound design, which is a creative approach to sound effects, really, and also crafting sound effects in a way that might suit film creatively in ways that sound may normally not be considered able to do. So music is similar in that respect. Obviously, everyone knows what music is, but for me, music and sound they live together, and they coexist. So it really didn't make much difference to me. They were all one and the same.
Yeah, yeah. What was the first thing you did where you were actually working against picture?
I worked for a filmmaker named John Cordy, and he was making these little animated pieces for Sesame Street. And he, I used to work for him, like just sort of as an assistant, helping him do this and that. But he knew I was off at school studying music, and knew that I was very interested in sound. And he had written this short little piece for Sesame Street. I should find it and send it to you because it's really cute. But it's all about sound being music, actually. And it shows this little girl walking through New York City, and she sees a man jackhammering. And this is very crude animation. She sees the jackhammering guy, and then she sees somebody playing baseball. You hear the sound of the baseball smack in the crowd, and then there's a man singing opera out of his window just whimsically, and then she sees a boat in the harbor chiming, and she hears all these sounds, and then she goes home. She gets up on her toy chest, and then she conducts, and all the sounds that we've heard become a piece of music. And it was a great little job for me because that was the first thing I did. And it was wonderful for John to actually give me that little job, because it was, I had to make this 30-second montage. And I did it all by splicing tape. And I was taught, like, well, if it's 15 inches per second, then half of that is a half note, and then it's a quarter note, and you keep cutting it down. These are 16th notes. I could create triplets by measuring the length of the tape. I could create different rhythms, and I would make these loops. And so I was very much into like rhythms with sound. So it was a great way to start. And this is right when sampling was kind of obviously there, but back then nobody could have recorded a sampler because those machines like the Synclavier and the Fairlight were just out of reach. I can't hear you for some reason. You dropped out.
I muted myself. I was going to say, yeah. Unless you're in Steely Dan, you could afford it.
Yeah, right. So that was my first gig.
Yeah, excellent. Now jumping forward 35 plus years and working today, you've done so many movies with Atticus Finch.
That's good. Atticus Finch.
Yeah. Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor, with whom I share a birthday, by the way. And so tell me about your working with them, bringing to the table your protean knowledge of music and your background in music. And because so often in movies, that there's like a Hatfield McCoy between the sound effects, sound design team and music. But, the music in David's movies is so well integrated. So tell me about working with them.
Well, the first time that we worked together was on the Social Network. It actually wasn't. The first time was on Seven. I had cut a remixed version of Closer that was a song that Nine Inch Nails had produced, and David Fincher was looking for a sound to put on the opening credits of Seven. So that was actually the first piece of music that was of Trent's that I had touched and edited to picture for Fincher. But I never met him. It was like something that we found on our own, and then cut in, and Fincher liked it, and we put it in the beginning of Seven. But the first time that I really got to work with Trent and Atticus was on Social Network. And what I think had happened was Fincher really enjoyed the experience of working with the Dust Brothers on Fight Club. And even though that was a one-time occurrence, what was great about the thinking behind Fight Club was that his thought was, let's hire people that don't know what they're doing. And not in a derogatory way, but in a fresh way.
Yeah.
And I think that the outcome of that soundtrack was really great. And I think, of course, David did Panic Room and The Game and other films in and around after he did Fight Club. But I think that when it came down to Social Network, again, he sort of recalibrated his thinking, like, well, wait a minute, this is a modern film. The soundtrack has to appeal to the people and the times, and it has to be contemporary. And I thought it was a really great idea. And also, he really wanted to kind of use synthesizers. Fincher did. I just want to have synthesizers in the film and have it feel like it's. Remember how we used to feel about Blade Runner when, and oh yeah, I love that soundtrack, Vangelis' score, so I think he got Trent involved, but I think one of the other really great ideas that David had was he didn't want to make their music feel like it had to fit a picture. He wanted them to feel free to write music for music's sake, and so he said, I'm going to just start writing music, and here's the story, and here's what it's about, but I'm more interested in your creativity. And so they ended up writing I think 22 demos and sent them over. And David was very excited, and I often will edit music for him. So along with Kirk and Angus, who were on that film as picture editors, we just were like, this is great. Yeah, wow, listen to this. And what was great for Fincher was that it gave him the freedom to discover a color of music that fit an emotion that he was craving to fulfill in his movie. And it was all original music that they had written with the intention of being in places. And some of course, the intention went right where they wanted it to go. And other times, however, David would say, yeah, I know you like that piece of music for here, but what if we put it over there instead? And so we got into those kind of creative places, which was a different approach to music scoring. Because typically what you do is you take an existing piece of music from a movie and then you temp it to your film. And then later a real composer comes along and sees all these shapes. And then they go, oh, well, that's what you want. And then you discuss, well, the reason why we like this shape, even though it's a bad version of the film, is because it fulfills these emotional needs that we require from the characters and so forth. What was great about this approach that David had, however, was that it allowed the music to be the music. It wasn't necessarily like a temp track, even though it was, and even though ultimately they ended up refining these rough edits. What was great is that the kind of the fundamental pieces of music were the same. Even they said, okay, now we get the idea now. Thanks for your lousy version of it. We're going to do a more refined version of it. But that was sort of the beginning, and that was a wonderful way to meet them, because there's this piece of music that they've later called Hand Covers Bruises, and it's this really soft piece of music with this delicate little piano melody, and it's a really intimate, kind of fragile piece. And when we were trying to come up with the beginning of the film, David had thought, oh, we need a big piece of music. It's the beginning of the movie. Let's kick it off with this sort of, movies for some reason or other, there's like this bias. We're bringing up musical bias again to, let's have the music be big at the beginning because we have to kick the movie off in this big way. But David's very creative in that he's like, well, what if we don't do that? What if we do something that's more character driven? And he said, well, can you try taking this piece of music for this other thing and put it at the main title? And we did that. And Trent and Atticus didn't even know about it because they were thinking it would be going someplace else. And I remember when they came for our temp screening, they were so happy because they were like, well, we never thought that piece of music would work at that location. So that was sort of the beginning of our working relationship and our friendship. They've changed their style now, since now they've been scoring a lot of films. And I think that they've moved through. I think with Fincher, they work in this way because they trust him and his team to not take pieces of music and then just ruin them, you know, because that's always a concern for the composer, is that some editor is going to take a piece of music and chop it up and make it sound horrible. And of course, we are very sensitive to that. We never would ever want to misrepresent music. But at the same time, we're also trying to help Fincher find his movie, you know, and find the rhythms and the beats of the film. And I think what's great about in this particular method, that I can show David 3 music edits. And it's not a personal journey for me because it was Trent and Atticus that created it, but they would trust me enough to go, well, okay, we don't like any of those, or hey, that's actually pretty cool, or actually that idea gave us another idea. So I think that a lot of it has to do with trusting each other, and, you know, earning that trust with me from, of course, David, but also with them, you know, in those early films, and that we collaborated on. So hope that answers your question.
Indeed. So these days, have you always been the re-recording mixer for music on David's films, or because I mean, the sound effects are and the sound design is your baby, but I know recently you've been re-recording the music. Has that
Yeah.
shifted over the years?
Yeah, it did. You know, we had Todd Bucklehide was mixing music a number of films, and he's a really talented composer in addition to being a talented re-recording mixer. He mixed Amadeus, which, of course, you know, what a beautiful mix musically, right? That he did. So we always wanted to have a great film music mixing person, and, you know, most times you have 2 people mixing, but David's films are so dense that we kind of realized that we needed 3, because the music mixing re-recording chair had a big responsibility. And then when we did Zodiac, was the first film that I decided maybe it would be a good idea for me to mix the music, because I was so involved in temping of that score that it really made sense for me to just mix. And so Todd was mad at me. We're still friends, but he was upset because he didn't get invited back. But again, it's always what's best for the film. And since then, yes, to answer your question, I have been mixing the music on David's films.
And so do you, you know, the whole issue of the balance between music and sound design. I mean, a lot of your sound effects show your lineage, show your provenance with music. I mean, there's certainly a history going back to, you know, the great Murray Spivak in King Kong, and he was a percussionist and a percussion teacher for decades. And so, you know, your work definitely has the flavor of someone who knows music. So you know, it's always been a great thing in movies when there's a blend that you really don't know which is which. And are you designing your sound effects against the score? Do you find that, irrespective of whether or not they're under your fingers, in your sound design phase, are you listening to the way you've edited the score, and so it's working with it?
Absolutely. And it's a really great lesson that I've learned, is that, you know, whenever any of us work on a project, our own contribution to that project is what we've done, and we want it to speak, you know. So if you make a great sound effect of something, or you want it to speak, or if you are a Foley artist and there's some elaborate footsteps, you want them to speak. Great dialogue, loop group, you want it to speak. Music, you want it to speak. And so there's kind of an initial instinct to favor your contribution in a mix, because it's the thing that you did that you think is going to make the movie better. But the truth of the matter is that there's another view of the mix, which is what's best for the film. and it isn't always necessarily your own contribution that best suits the film. And what I learned is the best way to make the film, at least the ones that I've been able to work, is to feel the mix through someone else's contribution. So if I'm holding the music faders, I become very aware of the effort that the composer has put into each element, because I have to learn it. I have to isolate, with the example of Trenton Atticus, for example, they give us lots of layers. So I will go through each track separately, each sound that they give us, and really listen to it and study it against the picture and go, oh, they've created this strange kind of distorted thing when, Elizabeth Salander does this when she's riding her motorcycle in Dragon Tattoo. Oh, that's kind of like a growl. That's kind of like a motor. That's interesting. We have a sound that's doing that, but the music is kind of doing it too. Oh, they're trying to give that a voice. Ah, that's great. Maybe we shouldn't have the sound of the motorcycle, or maybe we should tune the motorcycle to that sound, or maybe we should figure out how to make them both work, or let's just not use a sound at all. So that's been the biggest thing that I've learned, is how to best make the sound design work with the music, is to not be mixing the sound, is to be mixing the music, because then I realize, actually this is more important. And there are times where like, oh, but that sound right there, that's actually important. Let's let that speak. It's been wonderful in that respect. So yeah, it's a good way of doing it.
So Ren, it's been lovely chatting with you, buddy.
So nice talking to you, Larry.